I'm with Rabbi Dov Lipman from Yad L'Olam. Now, Dov, what is Yad L'Olam?
Yad L'Olam is an organization that was established to be a voice in Israel for new immigrants to Israel who are the Olim, their families all around the world, and global Jewry, people who love Israel all around the world, to be a voice within the government. Once they've arrived here or they want to come here, we have access within the Israeli government to be able to help people on individual issues, bureaucratic issues, but also to work on policy issues. And it emerged through the corona travel crisis as people all around the world, I'm sure many of your listeners, were not able to enter Israel because of the corona rules, and it'll obviously, with God willing, continue way beyond that.
What does Yad L'Olam mean in Hebrew, and why did you choose that name?
So literally it means Yad is a hand, and L'Olim means to the Olim. Immigrants to Israel make Aliyah, which means going up. By the way, those who leave Israel, who are living in Israel and leave to live somewhere else, are called Yordim, going down. Now, this is not talking about geographic going up and down, because you can move to a place that might be higher up the topography than Israel, but it's talking about spiritual. When you move to Israel, you're having a spiritual elevation, and when you leave Israel, you're having a spiritual reduction. So the Olim are those people, and we want to be that hand to be able to give strength and elevate those people who have moved to Israel, and certainly their families and beyond.
Why was the organization started? Was there a need for an organization like this?
It's interesting. When I was elected to the Knesset in 2013, I thought that I was going to work on religion and state issues that were important to me, Jewish and democratic state, how to maybe heal some of the wounds in Israeli society. And very quickly we were bombarded by English speakers in Israel who viewed me as their congressman in the Knesset. A few 100,000 English speakers who live here who felt they had a representative. And my office really turned into a hub of activity for those immigrants to Israel. When I left the Knesset, I would get a handful of people a day asking me for help for things, and I would guide them in the government ministries or whatever it was. And then a year and a half ago, when Corona hit and people were literally not able to enter Israel, and there were lots of bureaucratic issues involved. So I'd have 5 people asking me a day for help, and then all of a sudden it became 15, then it became 50, then it became 100, and then it became hundreds a day of people on a few different levels. People who were stuck and trying to get in, people didn't understand the rules, and also people who wanted us to lobby the government for change. So Yad L'Olam really came out of the need of that situation, where I now have an established organization with a staff, with a fundraising apparatus, just to enable to be as effective as possible.
Are there many bureaucratic issues that people face when they want to come and emigrate to Israel?
There are. The process is very difficult. There are some wonderful organizations that help people on the way to getting here. As an example, there's an organization called Nefesh B'Nefesh that helps North Americans in their Aliyah process. But I do believe there are things that we can do on a government level to make it even easier in terms of the documents that are required to be produced in order to come here. I think it's very, very difficult for people. And, the people who want to move here are usually filled with great ideology and passion, and they have such a desire to be here, and then the process makes it very difficult. So on the way here, and also once they're here, Israel is a wonderful country, which I am thrilled and blessed to live here, but it is known for having a significant amount of bureaucracy on the government level, and it's very difficult when a person comes here to navigate all that. So we're talking about in the health system, in the education system, in issues of finance and insurance, and all of these types of issues. People need a lot of guidance and a lot of hand-holding once they come here.
And you don't want to lose people who could actually make a real difference to the country just because of bureaucracy.
Very much. One of my goals in Yad L'Olam is that, I think that most people who move here want to stay here, but that the word should get out that it's the most incredible experience, not just spiritually, not just emotionally, but just in the day-to-day of getting settled here. It could be a lot better than it is right now.
Is life hard here in Israel for people who have left everything for a new life?
It's very hard to explain to people what that is. You leave your family behind that you're close to. You usually leave higher paying jobs than you have elsewhere, and that's hard. However, when you balance that with the thrill and the blessing of living in the Holy Land, in the place where the Bible took place, in a Jewish state. The hardships you're able to deal with the hardships when you come with the ideology. So, when people ask me, is it hard? The answer is yes, it is. People ask me, do you regret it? The answer is no, not one moment of regret. And every once in a while, you have to zoom out a little bit and say, you know what? Even though there are challenges I may not have had elsewhere in the world, it's the greatest joy to be here.
Now, at the moment, we're seeing in the news trouble in Ethiopia. Are you helping Jews return back to the land here?
There's been an amazing process in terms of the Ethiopian Jews coming to Israel. We had Operation Moses in the 1980s, Operation Solomon in the 1990s, and Colin Powell, actually, the former general and Secretary of State of the United States, he once made a point which is so important for your listeners to hear. He said the only country in the history of the world that brought people of color with black skin, and again, he's a person who was African American, from one country to another country to be free citizens is Israel. When people talk about it being a racist country and things like that, we brought the Ethiopian Jews here to be full-fledged citizens here, and that process has been continuing. I know that in the current situation with Ethiopia, it's not just an issue of Jews. Israel does want to be a place where if there are people who are being persecuted anywhere in the world, listen, we know as a Jewish people what it's like to be persecuted, and we do want to make sure that we can be a safe haven for people who are legitimately running away from some kind of persecution. So there are efforts being made on both fronts. One is to finish bringing any Ethiopian Jews who want to come to Israel and make sure they can be here, and also to be available in case people are not Jewish but feel that they need a place to run to and a refuge, and Israel can be that place for them.
How difficult has Corona been? Has it raised many, many challenges?
Corona has been difficult. I don't know that we can say it's been more difficult in Israel than in other places in the world. I know that Israel is a small country, relatively small country, both physically and population-wise, 9 million people, and I think it was easier for the government to take very hard steps in the beginning to try to keep things under control. So the shutdowns were difficult. People were hurt terribly economically. The new government has actually taken a different approach with the vaccinations, of course, really pushing vaccinations and trying to find a balance of keeping things open in the country while also monitoring the health situation. So sadly, Israel, like other places around the world, many people passed away. Many people got sick and still have lingering side effects. People certainly had their businesses collapse, and the country's trying to help them with that. But I have found, when I look at the corona situation, both in Israel and any other places in the world, I think it shows an incredible resilience of the human spirit, that despite this pandemic being thrown at us, people find ways to persevere and get through with God's help. And Israel is certainly an example of that as a country.
Now, you're originally from the US, so you've been through the experience of moving to Israel. Are you gleaning on your own experiences?
There's no doubt about it that anybody who moves here can definitely look at their experiences and try to help other people based on that. There's no doubt about it. I have to say that, thank God, our experience, I moved here with my wife and 4 children, was relatively smooth. But I do remember the longing for my family. That I do remember. We had jobs and we worked ourselves out and we had a home to live in. But I used to live, just a few minutes away from my parents and siblings, and now all of a sudden you're by yourselves. And part of what I want to do with Yad L'Olam is for people to feel that they're not alone, that there's someone they can turn to for anything at any time, and will deal with you with love and care, because we do know what it's like to move to another country by yourselves. And by the way, I know the flip side. I know what it's like for our families abroad to be separated from us, and specifically now during Corona travel, what it means that they can't come to Israel and be with their loved ones. So there's no doubt that personal experience plays a role, and all of the people who are working for the organization have gone through the Aliyah experience.
Are you seeing change lobbying in the Knesset?
There's a real difference, thanks to our voice, real tangible issues, both in terms of the current policies about entry into Israel, where we're working very hard for those rules to change for the benefit of immigrants to Israel, their families, and global Jewry for sure, and those from around the world who want to come into Israel. But there are also, I'll give you an example of policies that we're working on. If you call a government ministry and they say press 1 for Hebrew, press 2 for Arabic, press 3 for English, the person that you press 3 for English is just an Israeli who thinks they know English. So we're making progress within the Knesset on trying to reach a situation where government agencies, the HMOs for the health insurance, they all have have native English speakers so that people can actually get the help they need without suffering through the language barrier. That's just one example. And there's a real listening ear within the Knesset and the government towards these issues. We have a fantastic Minister of Immigration and Absorption now. Her name is Penina Tamanu-Shata. She's an immigrant from Ethiopia, actually, and she certainly went through the hardships of moving to this country and very much wants to make things easier and more smooth for people.
What motivates you to do this work?
We're blessed to live in the most incredible story in world history. Biblical prophecies are coming true in front of our eyes. I'm sitting here with you and I look around and I see greenery in Jerusalem. That wasn't here 100 years ago, and that's prophecy that says that the time will come when the land will reflourish again and the people of Israel will return from exile. And to be in that situation and have the opportunity to be part of it, to play a role in it, that's one part. I'm playing a role, and anybody who does anything, rolls up their sleeves in Israel to make things better, is playing a role in biblical prophecy coming true. But beyond that, you want to go to sleep at night knowing that you help people. That's what I want to do. We have a tradition in Judaism that God is a giver, and that we want to be like God and be someone who's giving. And everyone in our organization, there's such dedicated people to giving and helping other people through difficult times and through settling in Israel and having their voice in the Knesset in Israel. And that satisfaction of knowing that you're touching people's lives and helping them, especially when it comes to helping them with living in Israel, that's a motivation to wake up every single day and give it your all.
You've already sort of answered the question, but are you fulfilling biblical prophecy by doing this work, helping people come back to the land?
Every time a plane lands here and people move here, you can literally open up and see verses coming true. I will bring back the captives of exile. And there are so many different people who play a role in that. There's the NGOs like ours that are organizations that are helping. There's the government that's helping. There's the person who's working at the airport who's helping. There's the pilot and the airplane staff and so many others that are involved. And yes, you do have that feeling when you know that you're helping people live here, and then you can open up the Bible and see those verses and to say, wow, I'm one of God's many messengers to help make that happen. That's a feeling that really can't be described in words, and also makes you realize that you're involved in holy work.
Mm-hmm. What sort of good news stories are you hearing?
The best story, I have to tell you the one, and people should look it up online, was I got a phone call from a woman saying that her father survived the Holocaust, and as a child, was held by a righteous Christian woman who saved him during the Holocaust. But after the war, she wasn't able to take care of him. She gave him over to some Jewish women who weren't able to take care of him, and they put him in an orphanage. He didn't know what his name was, where he came from, anything about his parents. Was adopted from the orphanage by a Jewish family and lived in Poland and then moved to America, got married, had this daughter, and he has no idea who he is. He has a new identity. And his daughter, Lisa Barron, she made it her mission to try to find a relative of her father's. And through genetic testing, they identified a first cousin in Israel.
Wow.
He's in his 80s. We don't know exactly what his age is, but he's in his 80s, and now he wants to come to Israel and meet his only known biological relative from his whole life. But there was a problem, Corona. You're only allowed to enter Israel if you have a first-degree relative in Israel, and she's not his first-degree relative. So she turned to me for help, and with the help of Dani Dayan at Yad Vashem, we worked together, and we got him entrance into Israel. And last week, he came here, and I was there when the knock on the door came in Modi'in, and his first cousin walked through the door. And to see that reunion was absolutely remarkable. You talk about way beyond the goosebumps of biblical prophecy coming true as these two first cousins meet each other, and they couldn't be separated for hours. They're just sitting together and talking and learning about one another, and she's telling him about who his grandparents were. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? This little child survived the Holocaust through God's grace and built his life and gave up on any hope on ever finding a family member. And now here he is in his 80s, and now he's meeting his family, and he learns what his name was. What was his name? And as one Israeli reporter said, sometimes it takes an entire lifetime to figure out who you are. And I think that's a very powerful message. That's a very good news story that came from this period of time.
That must have been quite moving, but also very satisfying at the same time.
Absolutely. It was both. And again, I played a small little role. His daughter, Lisa, really did the legwork of years of trying to find somebody, and he made the effort of coming here. But it was certainly a blessing to be part of it.
What's your prayer for Jews wanting to come to the land today?
My prayer is that they should be motivated to do it. Very often you have an inspiration to do it, but you don't just go for it. There's one of the commentaries says that every time you have an awakening inside of you to move to Israel, that's from the DNA from Abraham. That's just built into your DNA and it's there. But we know the way life is. If you don't act on inspiration, then there's a certain inertia which could keep you away from doing it. So the first step is carpe diem, right? Just live the day, do it. Get up and do it and take advantage, seize the moment, seize the day. That's number one. Number two, be prepared for the challenges. Nothing worthwhile in life comes easy. The Talmud says that one of the things that's acquired through suffering is the land of Israel, and be prepared for that. I think when you're mentally and emotionally prepared for all the challenges that will come, you're able to deal with them more easily. So act on it, do it, be prepared for the challenges, reach out to organizations that can help you with the process, reach around to whatever network you can build around you to help you with it, and before you know it, you'll be settled here, and you'll realize that not only is it the best decision you ever made in your life, it's life-altering for not just you, but for all of your future generations as well. And now they're part of the destiny of the Jewish people in the land of Israel.
What's your website, Facebook page for people who'd like to know more, perhaps even give to the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. It's yadlolim.org, YADLOLIM.org. On that page, you can see donate. We definitely are reliant completely on private donations to do the work that we do, and you will. Genesis makes it very clear that those who bless Israel are blessed, and we can certainly use that partnership. We do have an active Facebook page as well, Yad L'Olam on Facebook. You can look at my Facebook also, Dov Lipman on Facebook to get updates, and we certainly welcome any partnering and support from any of your listeners around the world.
Okay, Rabbi Dov Lipman, thank you much.
Thank you so much for having me.